Since I grew up in like the conservative Central Valley, I didn't really see like LGBT folks in the media. I didn't see it in like out in public. Like people weren't like holding hands, and I was like, oh, that's a thing. So I really didn't know that it existed until I was in middle school. It was introduced to me as a bad thing because kids can be really mean, and I was finally introduced to the word gay, but it was a slur, and then other kids would call other kids like the F word, and they would single out students that they either perceived were to be queer or actually were queer, and they would ostracize them and bully them. And so I was introduced to it as like a slur and a bad thing, and I was like, okay, that exists, but it's something I don't want to interfere with. I would have crushes on like my best friend and stuff, and I just didn't really know that they were crushes at that point. I mean, I was kind of scared that I was obsessed with her, and so I would go on to Google and I'd be like, Google, why is my best friend so beautiful? And Google would be like, it's okay, you're just jealous of her. And I just kind of buried that deep down inside. And I was like, okay, phew, just jealous, that's okay.
I have a pretty small family I grew up with. In my household, it was just my parents and my brother. I was a very shy kid, very quiet kid. I was good at like keeping to myself and keeping myself occupied and stuff like that. I think it's one of those things of like you kind of, in the back of your head, it's always there. I didn't really start to like realize it consciously until about middle school, so 12, 13, maybe something like that. My family did a good job of not imposing gender roles on like me and my brother that much. So like my mom was pretty tomboy, so when I was growing up, I mean, I was born female and I've transitioned since then, they didn't impose like you have to wear a dress because you're a girl. They would be like, okay, let's go get clothes, and when I would go off to the boys section, they thought nothing of it. But yeah, I think I started consciously realizing that something wasn't quite connecting, at least sexuality-wise, in middle school.
I was raised Christian. We went to church every Sunday. My dad's he was a Catholic, but then he left the church, and so my mom, for her, religion was very important, so she tried to raise my sister and I to be very religious, to be Baptist. I think my interests, creativity, arts, drawing, painting, those were not traditionally things that young boys were doing. They were mostly outside playing sports. While my sister was opposite. While I was indoors drawing, my sister was out there playing sports. So I think always something was different, but I don't think it was until maybe sophomore year of high school when I really started to be confronted with my feelings for other men.
I did some research and I realized the summer before my freshman year in high school, I was like, okay, well, I am pansexual and I'm so excited. And so what I did is I just came out to my parents, my mom and my grandma, and the first thing my mom said to me is, well, you can't be sexually attracted to pans. So I was like, okay, back to the drawing board. So I went back to the little list that the internet gave me, and I was like, okay, bisexual. And so I kind of rolled with that for a while. And then later on in my high school career, I was like, okay, queer kind of fit in more appropriately for me, I think. When it came to the way I defined bisexual and pansexual, because I mean, it really depends on who you talk to about like definitions, because it's hard to define people. And so the way I defined those were like being attracted to people regardless of their gender, right? And there were kind of expectations that were put on me when I identified myself as bisexual, and so people would be like, oh, both men and women, and I'd be like, no, just all people, regardless of gender. Like, gender is a spectrum that you can't really put like binary definitions on.
Gender I didn't realize until after high school. Because I always knew I had that different feeling from a very young age, and I thought when I found out I was attracted to women that's what was it. That I found the missing piece of the puzzle. And I was fine like that for all throughout high school. I think I came out when I was 15, so I think it was like in between freshman and sophomore year. And it wasn't until like 18 and 19 that I realized, even after 4 or 5 years of living like this, that something still wasn't clicking. And I had actually had a partner and we met as lesbians, and then he ended up transitioning first. And I was with him as he was going through his whole questioning and struggle and him coming out. And I realized, I was like, oh crap, like I relate to this a little too much. And that led me to discover that I'm also trans and that I wanted to start my own transition. And that was 19 years old. I came from a really liberal, really accepting family, and yet it was still hard for a lot of my family. My mom was okay at first, and then she had some issues down the line, but she was very good at educating herself, like reading books, listening to like NPR stories or whatever she did. My dad is probably what was the hardest, because he came from a very, very old-fashioned family. Like if you imagine like a Leave It to Beaver in the 50s, like that's the family he grew up in, the American dream family, so to speak. And he still has a lot of those old-fashioned views, whether he likes it or not. And it was very hard for him to kind of be forced to change his beliefs, so to speak. Like, because he knew I was his child, he knew he loved me, and he had a hard time coming to terms with my transition.
What was going through my head is I was going to hell. That was my first thought. I would pray to God every night to take it away from me. I really felt I was letting down my family, my father, my mother. They tried to be very perfect and live this perfect life, and everything's about perfection where I'm from in the suburbs. And I felt I was a huge disappointment, and so I really tried to conceal it, to hide it. When I was a junior and a senior, I was having very deep issues with depression, and it was affecting my grades and my ability to perform in school. And I think my parents noticed that I was starting to retreat from activities that I once thought as fun, and I got a lot of enjoyment from. And so my parents checked me into intensive therapy my senior year, and I spent 2 weeks there. And I think it was from a therapist there through intensive treatment that she brought it out of me. And I was able to finally say those words, I'm gay. And that was the first part. I think the second part was actually having to tell your parents that. And that was one of the most incredibly frightening experiences I've ever had.
Back home, the first church that I ever kind of went to, I guess you could say religiously, was a black church, because my mom's black. I just liked it the best, and so I stayed there, and I was so excited, and I was jazzed or whatever. And then my pastor said something like really not okay, and I was like, shit. But like from that point on, like when I looked around, I was like, okay, like I can't let them know that I'm queer. Like I just kind of like shriveled up into myself, and I was like, oh God, this is really hard. And so I had to leave, and I've kind of been searching for a home church ever since.
Growing up, it was me and my brother, so I was the only girl, and I was his like little girl and everything like that. He really struggled with that for a good 2-3 years. The turning point, though, I think I was still living with them for the first like 3 years or so of my transition. And one day, I don't remember the context, but he came up to me and he basically said, he's like, I don't understand it. I don't think I ever will. But seeing you confident and happy has made me feel so much better. So when he started to see the shift in me, I think that helped him to come to terms that this was the right decision and that this is for the better.
My mom, her reaction was she always knew. From what I hear, mothers always know. My father, it was a lot harder for him to be okay with that, to understand, and I knew it was going to take time, like it took time for myself. So I think he's doing a lot better now. I talk openly about it with him. I talk openly about it with my sister and my mom. My sister is also lesbian, and my sister was always my dad's favorite. They always had a lot more in common, so I think when she came out as lesbian and having a girlfriend, I think it became, oh, geez, 2 children. I gotta do something here. And he's been okay.
Like the intersecting identities of being, queer and being black and being Latina and also being of faith is really hard. Like all those identities like to fight with each other sometimes. Sometimes every situation is different. But it's been kind of hard, but I think it's worth it. I think it's character building. Like everything happens for a reason. So I would say persevere, but also that, do what you can that keeps you safe. safety is such a huge issue. And also find your communities, like go to places like the Pride Center and just sit there and like soak it all in. Because I know when I first went into the Pride Center, I was like, this place is huge and this is amazing, like what the heck? Like it was so overwhelming, and I just really encourage folks to like find your communities, like go to a club, go to a GSA, go to the Queer Union, stop by your local LGBT resource center, go to the Pride Center. Like you don't have to engage in things if you don't want, but I mean just knowing that there are people and that there are resources, that can be like a driving force in your life. You're like, okay, like of course I can do this because there's a center of people there who all did it.
My goal in life is I have a psych major. I want to go get my master's in counseling and become an MFT and kind of work with trans people and help them out, especially relationships between them and their families, because I think whether your family is by blood or by choice, family I think is important. I do a lot of advocacy because I think it's important that people see that we are just human beings. And I understand that not all trans people want to be out there, and that's fine. One of the sayings that I don't necessarily live by, but I enjoy, it's like I'm visible for those who can't be. Because some people can't and some people don't want to, and that's fine, but I use mine to try to help just educate people and just show that we are people.
I didn't think that I could stand up for issues that were important to me. So I'm always amazed every day when I wake up about how far I've come, and I'm grateful for that. And when I tell my story or when I'm fighting for students for other issues, that's what I think about. It's my motivation. That's what inspires me to keep going. Because I'm happy for the people who came before me and pushed those rights so that I could be able to do the things I do today.